Hello, everybody. I'm Claire Appleby, and I'm the Architecture Advisor at Theatres Trust. And I'd like to welcome you today to today's webinar, What is Good Governance for Theatres? This is part of a webinar series for our Resilient Theatres, Resilient Communities programme, a 3-year pilot project that's been generously funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund, as well as funding from the Pilgrim Trust and the Swire Charitable Trust. Next year, we'll be hosting a new series of webinars as a part of this programme on the topics of audience development, sustainability of historic buildings, and fundraising. The next one will be about audience development, and we'll be hosting that round about April time. Details will be shared nearer the time via our website, newsletter, and social media, so please do keep an eye out and come and join us again. Just some very quick housekeeping notes before we As mentioned, this is part of a pilot project, so we'd be grateful for all feedback, and we'd like to request audiences to complete a short survey online about the webinar, which we'll email you a link to shortly after the event. Please can I ask you all to turn off microphones and videos during the webinar, and we request that attendees keep these settings for the duration of the event, so everyone can hear our speakers clearly and without interruption. We recommend that you choose the side-by-side speaker view in order to see slides and speakers. And we've also enabled the captioning of the webinar. So if you'd like to make use of this, please select live transcript. And that's the small CC button on your Zoom toolbar. If you have any technical issues, please do use the chat box and send your message to Theatres Trust host directly rather than to everyone, and a member of our team will do their very best to assist you. We will have around 20 to 30 minutes at the end of the presentations, at which time we invite you to ask questions. So please do type comments and questions into the chat box. Where relevant, please do indicate which speaker your query is directed at. Finally, as you may have noticed, we are also recording this event and we'll be sharing a link to that edited video with all attendees. And we hope to be sharing that by the end of next week. We'll also share the slides from today's webinar. So before I hand over to today's speakers, a very quick introduction. Today's webinar will explore what governance means and what good governance looks like in practice, especially for theatres. Governance is about how decisions are made in your organisation and who is held accountable for them. It's about how well your organisation delivers on its objectives and how its performance is optimised. And most importantly, governance is a systematic approach rather than a single activity or function. As part of the Resilient Theatres, Resilient Communities programme, we offered 3 half-day training sessions to introduce the topic of governance to a cohort of 9 theatres at risk from across the UK. And you'll be hearing from governance consultant and expert facilitator Laura Norris, who delivered that training later today. You'll also be hearing from Samantha Kelly from the Salford Victoria Theatre Trust, one of those training participants. But before you hear from them, I'll hand you over to our first speaker today, Sian Eager. Sian is the Theatres at Risk Advisor and also the Programme Manager for our Resilient Theatres, Resilient Communities project. She's going to offer an overview of governance principles such as leadership, decision-making and risk. She'll tell you about practical tools that can help focus your governance practice so that you can fulfill your organisation's purpose and vision. So, over to you, Sian.
Thanks very much, Claire. Thank you for that introduction. So I'm here today to give you an introduction into how you can start to work towards creating good governance within your theatre. So I'd like to start by looking at my first slide, which gives you a definition of governance, which is to ensure that we are all talking about the same thing. So this is a definition from Chris Cornforth, who is an academic who's written quite a lot about voluntary sector resilience, but in quite a useful way. So I think that this is a helpful definition, as it makes clear that governance is about systems and processes, but systems and processes that particularly focus on 4 things. Direction, which is the strategic leadership of the organisation. effectiveness, which is about the way that you use your resources in the best way possible to deliver on your purpose. Supervision, which is about monitoring progress and making sure your organisation stays on track. And accountability, which is about explaining and reporting on your work to people who are interested. So these 4 things are the key themes that make up governance. So your governing body is responsible for delivering good governance. Now, when I'm speaking today, I will be using the word board to reference that governing body. It may well be in your organisation that you call them something different, but for ease and for consistency today, I'll be using the word board. So your board needs to focus on ensuring your organisation is run properly. And it's important to understand that that is different from exercising management function. Management is about doing things, and governance is about ensuring that things are done properly. Now, that distinction is sometimes difficult for boards to fully implement, and that's quite understandable because often the doing aspect might be the more fun and interesting bit. But also, depending on the nature of your organisation, there may be reasons why your board members do actually need to be quite hands-on in supporting the organisation. You may be an entirely volunteer-led team. You may have a very small staff and be lacking in capacity or certain skills or areas of expertise. Or also there may be a situation or a crisis that requires board members to get really stuck in delivering aspects of your organization's work. Now, that is absolutely fine, but what's important in relation to this area is that there is a clear understanding of the capacity in which people are undertaking certain tasks. So board members need to ask themselves, am I doing this because of my responsibility as a board member, or am I doing it just as a volunteer role? And if you can keep that in your mind and understand those differences, that will provide a solid base really for moving forward with a lot of the governance work, because understanding demarcation of roles, having clear delegation and accountability channels is a key strand that comes up in our governance work. Okay, so if we move on, we're just going to look at now the starting point for working on your governance. Now, unfortunately, there's no easy way into this topic because your starting point is compliance. Compliance is about the things that you legally must deliver on. And sometimes it is a dry topic, it is quite detailed. I appreciate it's not everyone's cup of tea, but you need to find a way to deliver on this effectively within your organisation. So what do you need to look at? The first thing would be your governing document. This is your organisation's rule book that sets out why you exist, the powers that your board have, and the procedures that your board need to follow, in particular in relation to holding meetings, the way that you can make decisions, and the way you appoint board members. If you are a member of your board, then you need to read this document and you need to understand it and make sure that you are working within its requirements to deliver effectively. Then the next layer will be to look at the legal requirements that flow from your legal structure. Depending on how your organisation has been set up, you may need to follow company law and/or charity law, both of which place responsibilities on the organisation and on the individuals that make up your board. A lot of the responsibilities relate to filing information, updating both the Companies House and Charities Commission in terms of the changes in personnel, filing annual reports and accounts, that kind of thing. And that information is all publicly available then through those regulators. There's also an element of understanding the legal responsibilities placed on the individual board members and the principles that you're meant to use as you make your decision making. There are legal responsibilities for charitable trustees and for company directors. Unfortunately, they're not quite the same, but they are compatible. So you need to make sure that your board is operating within that legal framework. Then the next element is, if we just quickly finish, the last bit of the legal element is your legislation relating to your activities. I've listed some core areas there where you need to make sure you have appropriate policies and procedures in place and that they're properly implemented. Thank you. Next slide. Thank you. So having got your compliance in place, you can now take a step up and think about looking at your good practice. The best way I would suggest to engage with this is to look at your guidance from the key regulators, which I've identified on the slide, both in terms of voluntary sector, but also sector-specific advice. I would encourage you to look at the language that the regulators use, because in particular the Charity Commission, a lot of their guidance has sections which describe things you must do. So that's the compliance element. But they also help you with the things you should do, which is directing your organisation to aim for this practice that elevates you above the basic level and creates systems of governance that will support good decision making and help your organisation to run smoothly and effectively. And I'd encourage you to think about this not just as process, but a commitment to principles that are embedded within that to give sound reasoning as to why this good practice is useful for your organisation. And if we move on, thank you. So the next slide is the main graphic from the Charity Governance Code. This is the go-to code to develop good governance. It's developed by people who are drawn across the sector, and it's intended to be a practical tool to help you work on your organisation. It's written for charities, but it has relevance to all kinds of not-for-profit organisations, so I would recommend that you all have a look. The code sets out 7 principles, which you can see on the slide there, and identifies recommended practice to help you work on these items. Each principle also has a rationale, so a reasoning as to why the principle is important, and key outcomes that you would expect to have evidenced if you're able to work on this code. It is deliberately written in a word, it's described as deliberately aspirational. So it's written in a way that means that there's always going to be something to work on. And one of the ideas behind that is that this concept of continuous improvement, and that governance should be something that is needing attention and consideration on a regular basis and evolves as your organisation also evolves. I should also mention that the recommended practice is set up at different levels depending on whether you're classed as a large or small organisation. So it does have a practical application in that way. Okay, so we don't today have time to look at all of these 7 purposes. That it would be an entire training course of its own, but I just decided to pull out a couple that I think have particular relevance to theatres. So our starting point is looking at organisational purpose. This is important because your organisation exists to achieve a particular thing, and it's the board's responsibility to lead the organisation in fulfilling this purpose as effectively as possible. So the outcomes show us that if you deliver on this principle, the board is able to talk clearly and understand the purpose of the organisation, and also demonstrate that effectively externally to show that you're delivering on it. Now, this principle feeds into all aspects of your organisation's work. It impacts on your strategic planning, your income sources and how you approach income generation, and your business model. the partnerships you generate, and how you connect with your local community and your audiences. So the board plays a key role in delivering on this purpose, and it follows from that the board do need to engage with the artistic and creative agenda that is operating within your theatre. Now, some of you may benefit from staff and who are responsible for that creative delivery. And I'm not suggesting in any way that the board should interfere with the job of your artistic or creative director. But the board does need to be able to understand the artistic vision of your theatre and be sure and confident that it's a good strategic fit and it's being delivered well. So your theatre might be existing for a variety of reasons. You might be there to share, to deliver on a particular, serve a particular need in your community, or to encourage new artists and participation, or you may simply be there just to share the joy of live performance. But whatever your thing is, your board needs to be able to engage and critique that artistic agenda and develop and support and in a strategic way the delivery so that your team can deliver that purpose. Okay, so our next principle that I just want to have a quick look at, because we've touched on it already slightly, is about decision making, risk and control. There's a lot packed into this, and apologies, I meant to say earlier, the text that's on this slide is taken and the earlier one is directly taken from the code, so it gives you a flavour of the language that they're using and the way that they're trying to present each principle broken down into different sections. So this is about making good decisions and how the board approach that. And you can see our first outcome is a point we've already addressed, that the board should be focusing on strategic issues and not being drawn too heavily into operational matters. So on the next slide, we've got 3 other outcomes relevant to this principle. So this is about having clear systems of delegation. Now, delegation can be done in quite simple ways. You will have job descriptions for your staff. You can develop role descriptions for your volunteers, and you can have terms of reference for your committees and working groups. You can also minute things quite simply, like Bob was tasked with investigating sources of funding relevant to our community engagement project and reporting back to the board by the next meeting. That's an example of how you can record delegation, but it's important that those systems are in place. You also need a monitoring framework to make sure that your that your delegation is operating effectively. That includes key strategic aspects as well as just the financial element. One thing I would remind you of, though, is that it's great to have your monitoring systems, but there are people at the heart of this, and your monitoring systems will be more effective if you can also try to create an environment of trust and respect, so that your staff or your volunteers understand why the board need this information, and that there is a positive and healthy environment where questions and critique and suggestions can be shared and developed. And then the final element of this is about risk management, which is a topic in itself. But your board will need to explore your attitude to risk. You need to identify risks and opportunities and assess whether it's worthwhile for your organisation to pursue things, and what types of mitigation measures you need to put in place to protect your organisation from risk. This isn't just financial risk. We're also talking about operational, regulatory, compliance, and reputational risk. So running a theatre, you're going to face quite a few risks, I'm afraid, simply from the art form, which involves people and technical requirements, but also risks associated with running your building, which might be a historic theatre and have particular heritage demands. You've also got to consider your funding landscape, how you manage changes, for example, in the world of digital and the unexpected factors that come along, like, for example, RAC and things like that, and also how you maintain your audiences and stay relevant to your community. So there will be times when you need to take those risks, and that includes the approach you take to creativity. So you need to develop your own, what they call risk appetite, identifying when a risk is acceptable to the board or not. As I said, this is a topic all of itself, but for what I'd like you to take away from today, if anything, is that risk management isn't just about having a paper risk register that you look at once a year and put back on the on the shelf, or it's in the folder these days on the the network somewhere. Risk management should be an active part of your decision making. Okay, so I'm probably needing to speed up a little bit now, so I'm going to move on to my next slide. I just wanted to share this because this is something that I adapted from the Cultural Governance Alliance, who have a practical guide to governance. And these are the types of qualities that you would find in an organisation that had developed good governance. Most of the words have a common sense meaning, but I'd just like to pull out 3 of them just to be clear. So by participatory, we mean that you have the right people engaged in your decision-making process, which requires the board to have an understanding of their own skills and expertise and draw in people to help them make good decisions. We also have predictable. Oh, that sounds dull, doesn't it? But what it means is that if the same circumstances arose, your organisation would come to the same decision because they're, oops, apologies, my Teams just pinged up on screen. That wasn't meant to happen. So predictability is about ensuring that you have consistency in your decision making. And then efficiency is about how well you use your resources, but it also can apply to your decision-making processes to make sure that you make your decisions in a timely fashion with the right people and the right information, and aren't constantly having to reopen debates and revisit things because things haven't been done properly. So, oh, if we could just, yeah, thank you. So to me, this slide is shows how far good governance takes you from that first comment about compliance. Good governance is something which enables other good things to happen within your organisation. I personally think of governance as it's like the backbone to your organisation. And if it's done well, you shouldn't really notice it's there, but it enables the sound and effective functioning of everything else that your organisation is trying to achieve. So thank you. Next slide. So we're just now going to quickly do a top 10 things that you can do to work towards good governance. This does take time and effort, but the good news is that there are things that you can do that don't necessarily need huge amount of budget. So the starting point for me would definitely be to support the individuals that have stepped up to be part of your board. You can help people to understand their responsibilities, which in turn then will contribute to a highly effective functioning board. So start with the people. Engage with sources of support. There's a lot of help out there. We'll be circulating some guidance after the webinar to point you at organisations who can help with governance issues, and a lot of it is free. Get your compliance sorted, as I've already mentioned, and then work on putting in place your system to create clearly defined roles and get your delegation in place. If you haven't already, you could start with job descriptions for the core board members, such as chair, secretary, treasurer, that sort of thing. And if you have committees for things, make sure they've got terms of reference. Now, board members do need to understand the finances for the organisation, not in immense detail, but you need to understand the cost drivers within your organisation and your financial model and what the risks are to that. And then you can then apply that knowledge to make sure you've got sound internal controls and management systems in place. Then our final points, learn how to run effective meetings. Meetings are the main point where your board comes into contact, and they're really important for that relationship and decision making and functioning. So have clear agendas. Make sure you send information out in advance so people have time to read it. Make sure you give enough time for matters that need discussing, that sort of thing, to create the right environment for good decisions. Then the next one is another people one, really. It's about creating a team approach. Your board is a team. You are all working for the best interests of the organisation. So try to create this culture that allows criticism and disagreement in a supportive and safe space, if you like, so that everyone feels able to contribute in a meaningful way. Then develop your approach to risk and think about how well you're currently monitoring that at the moment and where your priorities should be in terms of development and understanding how collectively your board sit in terms of their attitude to risk. I would suggest that you could develop an action plan to step by step build your good practice and very much focus on one thing that you've recognised is weak within your organisation and look to build up bit by bit. And once you start that, it will then give you confidence to actually engage with this as a wider topic. And then the final point is, don't forget, you exist for a reason. So let your vision, mission and purpose guide you. Thank you. So here we have some useful links which we've put together, which provide an introduction to this topic. And as I've mentioned, there will also be a resource list which we've produced, which will be circulated after the webinar. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Sian. And that was a really helpful and clear view of governance principles. And I think it's a good point to turn to the slide that we have on the screen at the moment. Theatres Trust asked their trustees to share experiences of being a trustee, and the one that you see on your screen in front of you now is from Dave Moutry, who is the chair of Theatres Trust Board of Trustees. And we asked him what the most important quality a chair of Board of Trustees should possess. And I really like this quote, and I think it really chimes with a lot of what you've been saying as well, Sian. Curiosity being really, really vital and important, and about being able to provide that right amount of challenge and support at the same time, so for that continuous involvement. But just wondered if you had any comments that you wanted to make on it.
Yeah, I think this is excellent. It's about having confidence in recognizing that there are going to be areas where you need to ask questions and that there's always something that you can learn about, and that's a really positive quality to have at board level. And then also Dave's commenting on the team element of this and keeping focus and working together. So yeah, I would think that's a very helpful reflection, and obviously Dave has significant experience, so it's good to get his input.
Fantastic, thank you, Sian. Right, our next speaker today is Laura Norris, who delivered the training on governance to 9 groups from our Theatres at Risk Register as part of the Resilient Theatres, Resilient Communities project. Laura is an expert facilitator and consultant with extensive experience of the heritage sector. She has been the CEO of 2 major building preservation trusts and overseen several mergers, creations and terminations of charities. We'll now hear from Laura about what good governance means for theatres, with a particular focus on trustee recruitment. Thank you, Laura.
Hello all. Yes, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Sian has done an absolute rocking job at giving you such a good pillar. It's like the 7 pillars all in one. It was perfect. And I think I want to just reiterate what she said. Absolutely. I like to think of it as a hat stand. Sian has a backbone. I think of it as a hat stand because many of you are little organisations, and as a little organisation, you need to be able to say, yes, I'm a board trustee at this moment, and now I'm a volunteer. You will be doing things, but it's that consciousness of picking up one set of rules and regulations and putting down another one. Right, so governance. My next block, thank you. I'm going to reiterate what Sian said. It doesn't sit on a shelf. It is an active document. There are many times when I wish I had known at the beginning, when I was that CEO, when I was sitting on a trust board, if I'd known what I know now, it would have made life so much easier. It is for every point of a company or a charity, and I'm going to use those words interchangeably, so please forgive me on that one. But we have to think about governance at the beginning, absolutely, and that's probably one of the very exciting and novel things of looking at it. We have the idea of becoming a charity, we have the idea of becoming a company, we have the idea of being a CIO or a CIC. We have all these lovely phrases, but it's also for the winding up moment. And I love governance for that. It's very, very useful as a tool when we are beginning and when we are ending and right the way through. But that means you, as board members, have to be there looking at your documentation as you go. Those founding documents, the documents that you set up, create the organisation that will take you through, are the backbone. How you use them and how you work with them, that has a level of flexibility depending on whether or not you have a concept of something, or whether or not you're restoring a theatre, or whether or not you are running a theatre, or whether or not perhaps you've finished your job and you are moving on to a different phase, so you want to wind up your charity. It's not a bad thing winding up. Winding up can be a good thing. You have completed your mission, so let's remember that. I think we have an area here where we need to talk about the legal founding documents. And just remember that when you are a company, you will have a memorandum and an article. The memorandum is the thing that is an absolute pig to change. That will set out your vision. The article will be changeable. So please do think that through and get a hold on what you can and can't do. And as Sian has very clearly put for us, the things that, sorry about that, the things that you need to do every year. You need that timetable. But then we have the wonderful stuff that you can play around with as you move through your journey as a charity, as an organisation. Can I have the next slide, please? I was asked to choose a topic, pick a topic, any topic, and I chose recruitment. I chose recruitment simply because so many organisations have to face up to this particular challenge at some point. You might have to face up to that challenge because you, within your memorandum and articles or founding documents, You have a time limit for your trustees, stroke directors. It would be very good practice to have a time limit so that the same people are not sitting on the board in perpetuity, as many know. I think that time limit is something that can be quite difficult to work to, but if it is within your founding documents, it's an ideal thing to be able to point at and say, actually, now is the time for us to get a little change of perspective. Change of focus and perspective, well, that might be the moment that you move from a campaigns group to a group that's going to sign a legal lease. Or it might be the wonderful moment when you're welcoming your first audiences through the door. Whatever it is, that change of focus may mean that you need to ensure that there are different kinds of skills available to the organisation. It could be about resignations, it could be about people simply wanting to move on. And let's just say to that topic, it's a good thing. When people want to move on, they're not saying, I hate you and I never want to see you again. They're saying, I have given what I can and I now want to focus on something different. Good luck. And I think making that into something that you all as a board are open and acceptable about will help you in your progression as well. It might be you simply need to expand the number of people on your board. Who can do recruitment? Well, first of all, you could have the whole board. You could have everyone under the sun. But if you have the whole board, and if you have 12 people making decisions on recruitment, that's quite a difficult task. That's bringing in that idea of listening and making sure you're all valuing each other's perspective. Absolutely. But the whole board, 12 people, an interview of 12 people, I'm not a fan, I have to admit. If possible, a working group of the board would be a really useful way of doing it, 2 or 3 people. It might be that you wish to have some form of external input into the process. That could come from a like-minded body, it might come from another theatre, it might come from an advisory body, such as the Visitors Trust. Claire will now hit me for that one. Or it might be you want to go through a recruitment agency. It depends on your ability to raise the funds to do that, but it might also mean it might be or not be appropriate depending on the position that you are trying to recruit for. Next slide, please. So, recruitment's the easy bit. It's the planning and the preparation that you need to do before you start that recruitment process. Where are you? What are you doing as an organisation? Which bit of your journey are you on? Are you a campaigns group? Where are you? Are you going to open your pantomime next week? What is it you want to do in the next 5 years? What's the next step? Think about your skills and the skills of any advisors you have working to your board. Doing a skills audit is the most obvious thing to say here. It's not that it's a difficult thing to do, it is simply cumbersome. People don't like saying, I'm really good at that. People don't like putting a tick beside a box, but a skills audit document can be done anonymously and they are available online. You can have a good old snoop through the internet and find one that reflects what you want to do. Before you start that, or at the same time as you start that, you have to have an idea of what it is your next steps are and what skills you require to move the organisation forward. Think about where you're going to advertise. Is this something that, do you need a professional in a particular area? Is it somebody who might love theatre, but what you're looking for is very much about finance or is very much about charity law? Have a think about how you're going to promote the opportunity and do a bit of research. Talk to your comparators, talk to your other theatres, talk to people who might have already done this process, and think about where you could get the person who's probably been to the theatre but has not had a formal role within the theatre before. Think about your terms of reference, as John said, but then have a think about writing a role description. I know it sounds a little bit pompous to be writing role descriptions as a trustee, but it's incredibly useful to understand what you as an applicant are signing up to. Think about how you're going to get someone to apply for the job. How are you going to conduct an interview? What kind of questions? Do you want an external to help you through the process? I think the majority of the time, yes, you won't be looking at an application form. They do have they do have a place though. So a small an application form can help you assess like for like. Whereas a CV and letter of application, it may be more difficult for you to go through a shortlisting process. I think all of these will need to be in place prior to doing that wonderful thing of pressing a button and saying, look at us, we're fab, we need a whatever it happens to be. Advertising is the next slide, please. Advertising can be through a huge number of ways, but please listen to my plea here. Don't forget your local papers and your local radios and things that people who aren't clued into your industry but may well have the skills you need to bring about change. Absolutely think about industry websites, but think about what about people who are already working with you in some way, shape or form. Talk to them, see if they'd like to consider putting in an application. The worst thing you can do at this point is try and go for people who you already know. The idea of like breeding like. Having a board, as both Claire and Sian said, and that wonderful quote we've just seen, you want challenge, you must have challenge. If you haven't got challenge, you haven't got an organisation that's moving forward and adapting. So think about all of those different ways that you can get to people who will be interested in moving you forward, and then ask them to apply. Get those wonderful forms in. Once you've done that, you need to start thinking about shortlisting. Now, how you shortlist is going to be something you've already prepared. It's not something that you have to reinvent at this point. You want to be able to go to a document that says, this is how we shortlist. I would have loved, I would include within Sian's series of policies that you need, a recruitment policy, which gives you at least an outline of some of these things. But shortlisting, so you've got your either working group or your full board. You might only have 3 trustees, in which case you have your full board there, and you consider the applicants that are before you. You might have some questions for you. You might read somebody's application and they may not necessarily be appropriate for the appointment you're trying to make, but they may have really good skills. So when you're saying no to somebody, don't be as blunt as I've just been. You're not saying no to somebody. You're saying it's not a great fit because we need A, B, and C. But I noticed that your application brings out E, F, and G. Could we please have a chat with you about maybe volunteering, maybe coming on as advisor? try and make sure that you're not saying no in a way that stops them being a friend of the organisation and a friend you can use in the future. Shortlist and then interview. I think the most important thing absolutely is ensuring that if you have an interviewer's need, then they are catered for. Very insulting not to, so I think we'll all agree with that one. You follow the agreed process, and importantly, you ask them things such as what kind of Sian has talked beautifully about risk. Risk is one of those marvelous things that does change. It changes as an organization develops and matures and seeks to tweak its productivity. You need to, when you're ratifying process and appointments, please think about the declaration that will need to be signed by every one of your successful candidates. That declaration will be about the legal acceptance of becoming a trustee. So in other words, are there things that preclude you from being a trustee? If there are, they need to be declared and the board needs to be informed. It could be that there is a different way of working with that individual. It is not the end of the process. It is simply a knowledge base. Right, next one, because it's the most important and I'm very conscious of time. So induction. You've spent all this time recruiting somebody, finding the right person. The most important thing you can do is to support that individual, to get them to where you are and to allow them the ability to shape where you go from their appointment. Hugely important, and remember, it's not a one shot. It's not a one-hit shot. You have to continue that support. I think one of the most important things you can do in all of that lovely planning that I was talking about is start to gather together some of the key documents, some of the key pieces of information. That good governance link is vital to the activity. But what about your organisation? Where have you been? What decisions have you made and why have you made them? It could be that it's simple enough to be able to give out 3 months worth of minutes, or it might not be appropriate. But look back on those minutes and see what decisions are going to be made in the upcoming months. Building in a probationary period for a trustee is one of those oddities, but certainly for a larger organisation, the effectiveness of the whole of the organisation is built around the team that is going to be leading it. And if that team is fractional, then it's not going to be a good thing. It's not going to be good for the individual coming in. It's certainly not going to be good for the existing group. So think about a probationary period. Think about a code of conduct to make sure that everyone is working together and expectation is correct. Again, these are phrases and things you can find on the internet quite happily. You don't need any kind of resource to do that. And remember that it's meant to be fun. I think that's one of the things that when being a trustee isn't fun, when volunteering your time isn't fun, then something's going wrong. The most important thing you can ever ask is, do you have the time and do you want to do this? Is this a true one? There you are. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Laura. And really interesting to hear you talk about the kind of that importance of trustees and having fun as well. So right, you've got to be there, be in it with your heart as well. On the screen, we've got another wonderful quote from one of our trustees, Lucy Osborne, and she's one of the newer trustees. And again, this, I mean, it's talking all about that support and feeling supported by the group, and really kind of chiming back in with what you were saying about the induction process. And the other thing I really like about this quote is when she's talking about ensuring that everybody has a voice, everybody has a different skill to bring to the table, which I think is wonderful. And Laura, I wondered what your comments were on this.
Absolutely. I think that it is so important to ensure that that a board is a safe space for discussion and for not necessarily conflict, but certainly different views coming together. What you take out of that meeting is the organisation's way forward. Doesn't necessarily have to be your way forward, but your voice must be heard within it. So it is a skill to be a chair. It really is. And it's pretty skillful to be a trustee. So well done, Lucy, for that one.
Thank you, Laura. Brilliant. Our final speaker today is Samantha Kelly. Sam was one of the participants of the training programme which Laura delivered for us, and is the chair of Salford Victoria Theatre Trust in Greater Manchester. And Sam is going to share how her views about governance have changed as a result of the training, and what changes Salford Victoria Theatre Trust has made because of that training. So over to you, Sam.
Thank you, Claire. So I hope you can all hear me. I am Samantha Kelly. I'm the chair and the treasurer for my sins of the Salford Victoria Theatre Trust. I joined the group in 2015 and became the treasurer because nobody else wanted the job, basically. And it was what the group needed. So I then became the chair in January 2019. So I'm going to tell you how we've applied our governance training, but I've just got to show you Victoria first, the reason why we're doing it. So this is the Victoria in the early 1900s, not long after it opened, and notice the beautiful copper domed roof on the top. That whole roof line has been removed in the 70s, sheer vandalism, but we are where we are. So I'll move on to the interior. So here we are, beautiful Bertie Crew designed interior. It is now the only wholly Bertie Crew designed theatre left in the Northwest. A couple of refurbishments he did, the Palace Theatre in Manchester and the Burnley Empire, our sister theatre just up the road. So it was built with modern fire regulations. It was ahead of its time in that sense. They had electricity, but they also had gas laid on as a standby. So it was opened in 1900, but in 1899, Sir Henry Irving came and laid the foundation stone with Bram Stoker, his friend and manager. Now, he had a lot of local links. If we can have the next slide. So here we are, the snappily titled Manchester Courier and Lancashire General Advertiser. And this shows us that Sir Henry Irving wasn't just the friend of the directors of the Broughton Theatre Syndicate who commissioned Bertie Crew. He was in fact the proprietor, which is something we didn't know until we had this research from Beryl Patton, who found excerpts from the era and the stage and the Manchester Courier of the day. So moving on, next slide. This is the exterior of the Victoria Theatre in 2012, and you can see bushes growing out of it and everything. They're no longer there. The new owners have done some work on the building and made it watertight, for which we're very grateful. But as you can see, it's now 2023. The theatre is still deteriorating, and we really need to kickstart this restoration project to save it as soon as possible, really. So the Resilient Theatres Resilient Communities Programme training and funding for a governance review came along at a crucial time for the SVTT, because this year the owners have said that they would be willing to give the lease, subject to negotiation, of course. So we've now got a real opportunity to take this project forward, and we don't want to cock it up, quite frankly. We want to bring the Victoria back into use as a theatre and a cultural community hub, and we intend to open the theatre as a receiving house along the lines of the Plaza in Stockport, which has been very successful. So we need to be ready to do this. and we need to develop the group. We know we need to develop the board. We need to make the leap from being a campaigning community group to being a charity managing a restoration project. A pretty big leap. But the training in governance, in managing heritage projects and how to fund them, and more specifically the governance review, is giving us the tools to do that. So it's all good practical advice. Even if it isn't all relevant straight away, it's difficult sometimes to see how to apply things to your own group. But what I'm going to show is that through the training, we've come to understand that much like the Victoria, the business needs a bit of TLC too. And good governance isn't just about having the documents that make you legally compliant, but it's the dynamic, ongoing process that allows you to make sure that what you're doing is relevant and effective. It gives you a structure and processes to do that, and that gives you a solid base to operate from. It makes everything easier. So here we are with the Bible. Again, you've already seen this, but I can't say how good it's been for us, really. It's been fantastic. The Revelation in the first training session in March, you know, this tells you how to organise yourself. You don't have to flail about wondering. It's all here. Just follow the guide. So why hadn't we looked at it before? Well, some of it was context. We weren't there yet. We were a community group, and we couldn't really see how it applied to us. So if you can't see the benefits of something, you can't see the value in it. And we thought we had the documentation we needed to be legally compliant. We did for where we were at, but as I found out, really, I knew nothing about governance before we started this. You don't know what you don't know. So it's great when you've got people like the Theatres Trust and Laura, who've been a great help, and they're good at it and they enjoy it. So we were lucky enough to secure Laura Norris to do our review. And straight away, when we started looking at the skills audit and the roles and responsibilities, we realised we'd missed a few things, basically because of a lack of communication and continuity between the board members. Our first chairman had to step back due to work commitments in 2018, but he didn't actually step down. And our business manager was retired and spending half the year in Florida, but still attending some meetings before COVID. So the first thing we did as a result of our initial meeting with Laura was a bit of spring cleaning on Companies House. We contacted all the directors and asked if they wanted to remain directors or whether they'd like to join our official advisory panel. This was an idea from Laura as a way of keeping people involved and retaining the benefit of their experience without them having to take on the responsibilities or time commitments of a director. So they agreed, they thought it was a great idea, and we've removed them from the list of directors. So the other good thing about spring cleaning is that you always feel good afterwards. The benefit of that was that we actually started to feel more organised almost immediately. So it makes you feel good. It's great. Now, that should have been done sooner probably, but whose responsibility was it? It's obvious now that we didn't have clearly defined roles and responsibilities or understudies for any of the roles. So there was no one to take up the slack. But we were a community group. You take advantage of people if they turn up. You know, at that point, you're just hoping people want to get involved. So we didn't have an acting chair at that point. When the then chair, David, stepped back, it wasn't clear that he was stepping down. We'd left it open for him to come back if he could. And then, unfortunately, Alan's partner, our company secretary, Alan, his partner became terminally ill. So because we weren't having regular meetings, we couldn't really respond to what was happening. And obviously there's time constraints because you volunteered as well. So life happens. Personal issues have to take precedence sometimes. So you do need to have that cover between you and enough people to do the job. So we started with public meetings, trying to engage the community and trying to bring people into the project. So the skills audit, it didn't just make us consider the skills within the group and those that we need to develop and recruit for. We're not just looking to the future. we started looking at how we were dividing our time, how we were using the people, how we worked together, what the dynamics within the group were, and the importance of communication and consensus became something that we really focused on, working and supporting each other. We don't have a lot of people at the minute. We do need to recruit. We've unfortunately lost 4 directors in the last year. 2 of them died. And Alan's career has taken off. He's off and away touring with an operatic society. Can't blame a company rather. So this is what happened, and we weren't quite ready for this. Thank God we've got the governance review, but you've really got to think about how you work together. It's great when you've got a good working group, but you also need to know when to stop and just go for a beer. It really does help to just relieve the tension sometimes. But you should be able to, it's not conflict, it's debate. You should be able to have a good debate, as Mrs. Merton used to say. So next slide, please. So these are our documents. When we started, we had a statement of intent, we had articles of association, we had a business plan, and we kept our accounts up to date. We have a volunteer hours sheet, but volunteer code of conduct, policies, risk assessment, we weren't doing a lot that needed risk assessment, luckily. Policies, we had guidance for, but we didn't have the discussions within the group whilst I was there. But well, as far as risk assessment goes, we were taking part in workshops with the Theatres Trust and joining other people's events, so we didn't need to do the risk assessments, which was handy. So moving on, I became the chair of the SVTT in January 29 in order to apply for asset of community value for the Victoria, because getting that status for the theatre would give the community the right to buy if it was ever put up for sale. The documents we had to provide for that application included the Memorandum of Association and Articles of Association. Briefly, the Memorandum of Association, we understand, is your guiding document. It's how you state your goals and how you intend to achieve them. And the Statement of Intent is similar, but more general and less detailed. It's not got the clout of the memorandum, basically. And the Articles of Association would be how your group operates. It tells you, for instance, how many directors need to be present at a meeting for you to be quorate, for official decisions to be made, things like that. So it's useful, read them. We didn't always read them, but they are useful. Make use of them. So I had the Statement of Intent, and I had what I thought were the best Articles of Association. I pulled off a shelf. I became the chair. We all witnessed it, and I sent them off. We didn't get the asset of community value, unfortunately, but you have to apply for it within 7 years of the building closing. It's good to know. So when Laura asked us for the Memorandum of Association, the Articles of Association, I sent off the Statement of Intent and our articles. Imagine my surprise when Sian got back and said, I can give you the memorandum and the articles. And I was like, how? And they're on Companies House website, of course. They would have been registered when the company was registered. Why did I not know that? I didn't. But that's the thing. I've never seen the document. I don't have a copy. It's the only one that hasn't been passed on to me. An omission, but this is what happens. And that speaks to the lack of continuity that I was talking about. Because of the way things happened, and I can't blame Bob for being in Florida. I would have been if I'd had the chance as well. So next slide, please. So this is our Memorandum of Association, and in fact, it's a really good Memorandum of Association. It will allow us to do all sorts of things, to campaign and hold events, whatever we need to do in order to open this theatre. So we didn't know how good it was, really. We didn't understand practically what a memorandum was good for and how it could work for us. We do now. So Laura and the governance review have really helped us apply the training to our situation. Pauline's our new company secretary since Alan stepped down, and she has been minuting our work and making sure that we are making a note of actions and who is doing them and when they're going to be doing them by. And that's a really useful thing to do because it helps us all organise and help each other to get things done as well. So she's our researcher as well. She's been researching a move to charitable incorporated organisation, a CIO, which is what we're going to be discussing in our governance review. So the good groundwork put in by the group when they first set the SBTT up has stood us in good stead. It's still useful, it's still very relevant, but they didn't have a process in place to communicate that to new members and check their understanding. An induction pack, in fact, and an induction process. So we're working towards having one of those now. Recruitment has to be our big push right now, our main focus. But the training, I have to say, it's made us more aware of how governance can help us. And the 7 principles of governance have given us the tools to do it. So we're looking forward to the final part of our governance review in January, which will be the visioning session. And this is the fun planning bit, basically, because we're really starting to enjoy this now. It's working for us. You know, the governance review is putting us in control and giving us the confidence to do the job as well. So it's becoming more satisfying. And especially because when it's completed, we'll be equipped to take this restoration project forward. Now, I hope you can hear me with the rain because I'm just going to sum up and give you the key takeaways from our governance review so far. So the importance of clear roles and responsibilities for trustees and having cover for them, very important. Communication and consensus. Don't make assumptions and communicate better as trustees. Be realistic about your time commitments. There's no point if you burn out and you don't want to do it anymore, or you overextend yourself and overpromise and you really want to do it, so you end up really stressed. If you can't see the benefits of something, you don't value it. So it's worth researching something and understanding what the benefits can be before you start a piece of work. It can be difficult to see how things apply to you, but persevere, and there is help around. People like the Theatres Trust, the charities website that we got the charities governance code from. There'll be a link for you there, dead useful. And finally, it's important to do regular spring cleaning. Don't become complacent and governance will work for you. That's it. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sam. You've been so enthusiastic throughout this speech, and I kind of really get the sense that you're getting into governance. You're beginning to really quite enjoy the processes behind it now, which is fantastic.
Absolutely, because I think we feel like we were flailing around a little bit before, just thinking, oh, we need this, we need that, what else do we need? But that actually, it's methodical. It allows you to look at things in an order and a structure, so you can start understanding where things come in and where you can use them.
That's brilliant. So kind of the message out there is don't be daunted by it, but it's there is a real kind of tool to help you and help your organisation.
Yeah, definitely. We're really starting to enjoy it now. I hope that did come across. Laura has made things more understandable. It really does help to get somebody sometimes to explain things to you, and don't be afraid to ask for help because everybody is very helpful.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Sam. That was wonderful. I want to leave a little bit of time for questions. So I'd like to thank all of our speakers today for helping not only to demystify governance, but also making that topic come alive and feel very relevant as well. So thank you, everyone. So